Hello, everybody. Hello, and welcome once again to Leadership Skills for Managers. I am Bill, the company's expert, and this is the live stream I do once a week where we talk about business topics, higher level business topics and leadership topics. And so today, we're going to talk about how to manage people. This is episode number 21 of this stream. So thank you for joining me today. This is where we get to talk about that stuff. If you have ambitions to be in management, if you are in management and you want to be more effective, this is where we talk about that stuff. This is an interactive live stream. So if you're seeing my face, you should see a chat box somewhere in the vicinity of my face, depending on what device you're watching this on. If you have been a subscriber to my YouTube channel for any amount of time, you should be able to get in the chat and let me know what's going on with you and what your reactions are to some of the topics that we're going to be discussing today. First off, a shout out goes out to my YouTube channel members. Membership has its privileges. And all to special thanks to my Patreons, to my super thanks donors. Those are always nice to get. And to you, my viewers and participants. You guys are awesome. Thank you so much for being here. Yeah, without any further ado, let's launch into this. So we're talking about how to manage people. Huge topic within business. And as most people have probably gathered by now, there are some people out there that actually have a clue as to how to manage people, and a lot of people who really, really don't. And if I were to venture a guess, I would say that that's because of a widespread kind of ignorant sort of belief that, if you can do a job well, then you should be able to manage people doing that job. And that's not necessarily the case. It really isn't. Part of it does come down to your personality, but a huge part of it is knowing how to deal with people, how to manage people. That's an area of study that has been studied since antiquity, since people were putting together armies and things in antiquity. They had to learn how to get lots of people to work together seamlessly and, so that someone in charge can issue orders and those orders are carried out, and everything works fine. There's communication, there's motivation, all that kind of stuff. They figured this out a very, very long time ago. And that's been handed down. And we've obviously developed that ever since. So that's what brings us here today. And so if you've never been trained on this stuff, you're actually missing out on a ton of information that would make you so much more effective if you are in a supervisory or management type position. So that's what we're going to talk about today. Okay, let's get started. So let's see where to begin. This is a huge, huge topic. Maybe one place to start is something I've talked about before, which is leadership styles. That's a very trendy, buzzword-laden kind of thing that people are talking about these days. Yes, it's in the context of job interviews, but it's also a very kind of trendy type thing that people talk about. The bottom line is that there are several leadership styles, and there is no standard terminology for them. They teach you one way of doing this in a business school. They refer to it as different things out in the real world. The bottom line is that on one extreme, you have the authoritarian, autocratic leadership style. This is think military, right? You have a general or someone that barks out orders, and people don't question, they don't debate, they just follow the order, and they do it pretty quickly. That's the idea. There's very little discussion about it. The person in charge says something, it goes out, people follow it, end of story. Now, obviously, there's a time and place for this. And if we think like the military, if you're in a battle or something, there's no time to discuss things, right? You just have to have one vision from one person. They lay it out and then people follow it. And so there's obviously a time and place where this is appropriate. It does fulfill a need. It's also the leadership style that's the least cumbersome in the sense that, there's not a lot of process involved in figuring out what to do. The person in charge simply says, this is what I want, and then that goes out, and then people have to follow it, right? So in terms of efficiency, you could look at it that way. It's the most efficient, right? Now, obviously, it's not ideal in many other respects, but in terms of, just getting things moving, it's the most efficient way of doing things. Now, the problem is that although this is appropriate for certain situations, like any kind of situation where you're doing damage control, it's very rare that in the context of business, we get like a true emergency. You know what I mean? If it was an emergency type situation, then obviously this would be the leadership style that you would invoke, right? But in a business context, we don't really get those. We're not really thinking in terms of those. We're not talking about life and death situations. So if you exclude that, in business, this tends to have more problems than it solves. So that's the issue. If the person who makes the call makes the wrong call, there really is no checks and balances for it. It just is allowed to run free, and then you meet the consequences of the instructions head on, right? So that's the authoritarian or autocratic leadership style. There are times when that might be necessary. For example, if you're supervising some kind of workplace, maybe a shop type environment, that's what I'm most familiar with. You have people in the skill trades, and some mishap happens. You have like a fire breaks out or whatever. Then obviously, an autocratic leadership style is what's necessary. I'm talking beyond simple training for safety issues. You know what I mean? Like if there's a fire, people know to run out of the building, right? But beyond that, that's when an autocratic leadership style really is the right way to do things, right? No time for discussion. So on one extreme, we get that. And then going towards the other extreme, in various steps, you get things like a delegative leadership style in no particular order, where you're sort of giving your direct reports sort of tasks and letting them take ownership of different things. Right? There's the, let's see if I can remember these. There's the delegative leadership style. There's the consultative leadership style, where before you sort of issue orders of what's going to happen, you consult with people, usually one-on-one, and, you say, what do you think? What's your take on this? And you kind of discuss it and you get their input. So that's one way of doing things. It's very similar to a participative leadership style, where you get everyone together and you all have a discussion about it, like a meeting or something, where everybody can hear what everybody else's suggestions and thoughts are, and then you can kick it around. You might get different factions that want different things, and then you make a decision, right? So that's one way to do it. That's kind of more social type way of looking at this. And then I think that's kind of like the other extreme, isn't it? You have autocratic on one side, you have various things in the middle, and then you have more of a participative leadership style, almost like a democracy, on the other, right? There's all kinds of other things. People like, to use all these buzzwords like servant leadership and stuff like that, which, from my experience, isn't really a thing. You're kind of doing that type of stuff to varying degrees anyway, without making it its own thing. So there's different ways of making decisions. This is the decision-making part of managing people. If you're in charge, you have to make decisions. You have to give people guidance. This is what we're going to do. And so there's many ways of handling that, right? And these are some of the ways of doing it. Okay. I should probably have thought of a better structure. Now, feel free to jump in at any moment if you have any reactions to any of this, or any ideas or any questions, because this is, after all, not meant to be me talking at you. This is supposed to be an interactive live stream, so we can kick around some ideas if you guys would like to do that. Okay, so that's one aspect of managing people. There's many aspects of this. I'd like to share right off the bat something that I did when I was in my corporate career at various levels, more towards the upper levels. But it's not original to me, but this is something that was absolutely essential to having things work properly. And that is having one-to-one meetings with all of your direct reports every week. This is something that I did. I did it as a CEO, I did it as an executive manager, and I did it as a middle manager. And it's something that is super important for things working well. And usually you would have approximately 8 direct reports. That's going to vary depending on what role you're in, but if you're managing people, usually 8 is about the sweet spot. So with approximately 8 people, it is possible to set up 8 meetings every week, maybe half an hour, sometimes even up to an hour, depending. One-on-one in private with each of your direct reports. And what this is, it's a way for communication to flow both ways. So if you have an office, you could have an in-office meeting with each of your direct reports, one after another. Now, there's a couple of caveats here. You can't defer these. You can't cancel them because that's a sign of disrespect to each of these people. The idea is that you say, look, our meetings are sacred. You're important to me. What the work you do is very important, and our time together discussing it is very important, and you're very important. So if you just turn around and cancel those and keep deferring them, that signals pretty strongly that employee doesn't really matter to you. At least that's how it's going to be perceived. So you've got to be able to sort of have some discipline and not cancel or defer those. And then in these meetings, it's an opportunity for them to bring up questions, issues, let you know what's going on, that kind of thing. So like the communication goes one way. And then for you to explain, to clarify, to be able to persuade, that goes the other way, right? You can answer their concerns, you can explain, like all this kind of stuff. So what I found is that those are extremely valuable, and I recommend that approach to anyone else. If you can possibly do it, that's a very effective way of doing things. And it also builds up a lot of loyalty in your subordinates. If there's issues, they have an opportunity to, confidentially explain their kind of side of it, and you be able to respond and, get a plan together. It allows you to explain your reasoning behind decisions or instructions, this kind of thing. So for a variety of reasons, it really works very well. So that's something I just want to share. That's not really part of any kind of comprehensive discussion of people management, but that's a very effective tool I found to use. We got people in the chat. That's great. Someone says, great topic. How can you tell what the style of a company or manager is? Well, it's like saying, how can you tell if someone's an introvert or an extrovert? It's like, well, when you're around them, just by how they interact with you, you will get some hints as to what style of decision maker they are. So, for example, if they're someone that they never have meetings where they discuss open issues and get input into them, instead, always the decisions are always made behind closed doors, and then you're informed of them, then that tips you off as to the style of leadership of your boss. They're not a consultative leader. They're not a participative leader. They're more autocratic. That would be the implication, right? So you would know by just interacting with them, getting a feel for how they involve you in things, if at all, right? So that's what I'd say to that. It's pretty obvious, But that's a good question. Another aspect of people management that doesn't get talked about enough, in my opinion, is incentive structures. This is something that they obsess about when you get to executive management. A lot of executive compensation is based directly off this stuff, right? Where, what they do is they try and influence your behavior, how you do your job and what you do. And the way they do it is they try and reward you for good behavior and punish you for bad behavior. It's very simple. So for example, if you get a job as a manager, they will have the big difference between workers and managers is that, workers might have a couple of compensation components. You'll get a base pay, you'll get a, benefits, that kind of thing, which is non-financial compensation. It's where they give you a thing that isn't money, right? Anything that falls under that category is a benefit, not pay. And they might give you like profit sharing or something like this. But once you get to the management stage, you'll see that you have different pay components, usually performance pay. And there'll be many different types of performance pay. For example, if the entire company does well, they give everybody, pay based on that, right? Like it could be locked off the share price or, other internal metrics. If your work group or department or division does well, they'll give everyone in that division, a bonus or pay based on that. If you personally do well, you hit certain goals, like in terms of numbers, they will give you performance pay based on that, right? So that kind of encourages people to focus on certain things. If they're saying, we want you to, process work orders. And what we're going to do is that beyond a certain base number of work orders, for every work order you process, we'll give you like a certain amount of money, we'll give you a bonus based on like how much excess work orders you've done beyond a base value. That encourages people to care about the number of work orders they do, right? It's linked to their pay. If you say, okay, but we want you to do them right, so for every work order where the customer complains about it or there's some defect, we're going to dock you pay from that bonus amount, right? So the more you do, the more money you get, but then the more ones that are done badly, the more money you lose. So it encourages people to do a lot of work orders and do them properly, right? So, and so forth, right? This is very important. If you want the people in your group to be doing the right things when you're not standing over them, watching them, you need to provide them with incentives to do it. And this is a huge topic. There's financial incentives that you can do, where you set it up explicitly. And there's also non-financial incentives that you can do. A lot of people who are supervisors find that they have to rely on non-financial incentives to really motivate a lot of their workers to do like the right thing, to be working on the right thing and produce the right results. If you do this for me, I'll do this for you. I'll bring donuts, or I'll publicly commend you in front of everybody else. And say, wow, you're awesome. You're a real value to the team, or, I really appreciate everything you've done. This kind of thing. Give people an attaboy. On the low level, that stuff does matter, right? Letting someone go home early, or whatever other little non-financial thing you can do. Sometimes it's appropriate to do that, and it carries a lot of weight. So, things like this, right? But, it has to be done properly. It has to be done fairly, and there has to be like a formula and all this kind of stuff. So, but that's a huge, huge area of managing people, right? The situation we have all too often is where workers, they're on like a base pay, and they get paid the same no matter what they do. If they fall asleep or they work like a dog, they get the same amount of money, and nothing really changes for them. So, what does that encourage people to do? It encourages people to slack off. If you get paid the same, no matter what you do, Why break your back? So there's a lot of things there. And then, you come up with various things like management by objectives, right? MBO, management by objectives, is a very common thing. Most people don't understand it. Most people think they understand it, but they don't. A lot of people think it's just managers assigning goals to employees. That's not what it is. That's completely ineffective. I did a big, long video about that a couple of years ago on this channel. Not many people really watched it, but it's the idea that the critical thing for management by objectives, which can be very effective if done right, is that the manager and the workers have to mutually agree on a goal. They both have to agree that this goal is reasonable, it's doable, and that should be our goal, right? If you skip that step and the manager just assigns a goal to the workers, that usually doesn't work. You're not going to motivate anybody with that, right? For example, if it's a very lofty goal, you say like, listen, you get paid $500 if you complete 500 work orders. But if you can complete 1,000 work orders, I'll give you $1,000. Right? Now, think about this for a second. In order for that to be effective, if the worker believes that there's no chance in hell they're going to be able to do 1,000 work orders, are they going to break their backs trying to do 1,000 work orders? No, they're not. Because they might get 800, but they didn't get 1,000, so they don't get the reward. You know what I mean? Or maybe they shoot for it and they get to 974, but whoops, they didn't hit 1,000, so sorry, you don't get that extra $500 bonus. Right? So workers know this. They know that if that's not a realistic goal, then why break your back doing it? Especially if there's no reward, right? Management by objectives only works if the workers also agree that the goal is appropriate, right? And then it can motivate people, right? So anyway, there's things like management by objectives where you set it up, you set an objective, everybody agrees on in terms of numbers what should happen, and then there's some kind of incentive for everybody to meet those numbers, right? And it can get complicated because, as you can imagine, just making numbers is not the goal. You need to, you can't fudge numbers. You have to do it properly, right? So there's a lot of other things you'd have to set up to make that work. But that can be very, very effective. You can just, it's like a win-win. You get what you need from your team, and they get a reward for giving you what you need. And everybody's happy. That's the idea. So that can be a useful tool if you do it right. It's not just as simple as assigning a goal and then just saying you get this bonus or whatever if you do it. So there you go. So incentive structures, there's like a ton of things in there. It's just impossible to go into a lot of the stuff there. But this is the key thing. You've got to motivate people. If there's behavior that you don't want, you need to deal with that by assigning it essentially like some kind of punishment. It's not good if you say coming in late is a problem. There's got to be a consequence for it, right? If you do want people on time or you want people early, you could say, okay, for people that come in early, there's some kind of reward, and usually rewards are what we go with. Punishments don't really work. They worked in the military, like where a lot of this learning originally came from. Punishments worked in the military because you couldn't quit the military. You know what I mean? If you were a soldier, you can't just go home as soon as it starts not to get fun, right? But employees are not soldiers. Some people seem to think they are, and they use all these military, sort of parallels, but it doesn't work because employees can quit. Like if they don't like something, you can't push them around. They just leave and go somewhere else. So that's why punishments just don't work. rewards are really where it's at. That's how you motivate people. So did you get a reward or you didn't get a reward? And that is effective in motivating people. And if it's not, you're using the wrong rewards. So whatever it is, you have to find out what people respond to, right? A lot of times, financial rewards are pretty effective, but not all the time, right? And if people are absolutely miserable, maybe financial rewards are really not what you should be doing. Maybe you should work on the fact that they're miserable. You know what I'm saying? So anyway, there's a lot of stuff in this umbrella of incentive structure. That's something that if you've never studied how to manage people, this is something that you could definitely benefit from by learning the theory. And then you set it up so people want to do a good job and they get a reward for it. And you look like a hero because your team is kicking ass, So there you go. So that's a key pillar of it. As always, get in the chat. This is meant to be ideally an interactive live stream. So let me know what you guys think of all this stuff. If this seems like it makes sense or it doesn't, let me know your thoughts. If you want me to cover a certain thing, we certainly can. Other areas of how to manage people, one huge sort of area of this is communication. And there's many different parts of this. One is communication channels. So if you're on the job and you've got a boss that loves to communicate entirely via email, that's probably not going to be ideal. That's probably going to be pretty dysfunctional, to be honest. Having to, type everything out and send it in an email because you can never see the person face to face, or you can't get them on the phone or anything like that. That's going to create a bunch of issues, right? Things like email, obviously it's important when you're documenting things, when you're sending people technicalities like numbers and specifications and things. But, for most communication, you shouldn't have to do it over email or any other written source. You should be able to talk to people face to face. That is the most effective form of communication. Not only do you get the most rapport with people, but it's real time and it's a two-way exchange. So you can have a dialogue. You can have a conversation back and forth. What about this? Oh, then you do this. But what if I encounter this? Then you do that. Is that what you want? No, I'd prefer this, right? It's just a back and forth. Can't do that over email. It's not a two-way thing. It's a one-way thing. And when you try and use it for two ways, it just fails. Even things like chatting and texting, they're still not ideal for that kind of stuff. So communication channels are very important. Also, bosses that book meetings for absolutely everything. There's a time and place to have a meeting when you want to have a sort of group discussion about something, right? But they're very time consuming. A lot of meetings are basically pointless. It's someone's attempt to disseminate information, when a meeting is not really the proper tool for that. If you're just trying to inform everybody of something, a lot of times a meeting or a get-together is really not the right way to do that. You could just send someone documents. You could say, review this. Would you like to have an hour meeting about this at a certain time, or do you want me to just send it to you? You take 10 minutes to review it. But I'm expecting everyone to be familiar with this. That kind of thing, right? So communication channels are extremely important, and just relying on everything going over email, which is a lot of what a lot of bad managers do, that's not a great way of doing it. Communication is huge. There's different pillars of communication. Another one is communication adaptability. Like, for example, most people can communicate very, very well with people who are exactly like them. Each one of us, we're awesome at communicating really well with people who are just like us, right? We think the same. We make decisions the same. We have the same sort of social preferences, same work style, same communication style, same background. It's not too hard to develop a really good rapport and make yourself clear and understand the other person when they're exactly like you. The challenge is when you're dealing with people who are not like you. Maybe you're an introvert, they're an extrovert, or vice versa. You know, maybe you make your decisions based on hard, cold facts, and they make all their decisions based on feel and emotion, right? You know, as a couple of examples, right? Maybe your background is finance, their background is marketing, or, you know, they came up through skilled trades or something, you know? Like totally different backgrounds, right? So when it comes to people who are not like us, either in personality style, type or communication style, work style, or background, that's where it gets rather more challenging in communicating effectively with somebody, seeing their perspective and having them understand you very clearly. There's a lot of managers, people that have been put in supervisory or management positions that don't understand this, you know, and that's what makes them particularly bad, because if you have a different personality to them, they regard you as an idiot. Not that you think differently and you have different skills, but no, you're just an idiot because you're not like them, right? That's a very sort of base level way of thinking, you know? So managers that are good at managing people, they tend to have some basic skills in being able to communicate with different types of people, knowing a bit about them, knowing what they respond to and what they don't respond to, you know, or how to persuade them, how to make them see your perspective and how to see theirs and vice versa, right? So this is something else that's like a huge universe in, you know, how to do. And there's people that just sort of study this and they go off and deal with corporate communications, they deal with public relations, they deal with, they become therapists, you know, like stuff like this, right? Or teachers. So huge area right there. And most managers should have a basic understanding of that to be effective. So, okay, I think I've talked for about half an hour straight here. What do you guys think of this stuff? Have you ever seen any of these out in the real world? Have you seen people that do this stuff or don't do this stuff? Have you seen anyone that like doesn't understand this and it's caused problems? Or, you know, is there a particular area of people management that you're wondering about that we could maybe cover? Let me know. I'm going to open it up to you guys for questions. There are 16 people here, so thank you for joining me today. Get in the chat. While I'm waiting for questions, check out this course. If you want to learn business, you want to learn how to manage people, you want to be given the tools to be able to do that kind of stuff, check out that course, the $100 MBA. There's a link in the description box that will help you. That's a course that I created. For what it's worth, I have an MBA, and I created a course that basically covers all the material you would learn in an MBA. And it's very, for $100, not $100,000, $100. And the way that works is that essentially you get a reading list of the textbooks that are used in MBA programs, some of the most popular textbooks in the world, the most highly regarded, that are used in MBA programs around the world, particularly in North America, some of them in the Ivy League schools in the States. I've read these books cover to cover, so I know them, and I'm very comfortable in recommending them. And that's where you learn the material. And you can either skim it or you can go in depth, depending on what you're interested in. And I provide videos that guide you through all of that. So I give you my take on, you know, various topics within it. And I also talk about how, you know, like, you know, maybe where the more important stuff is, where the less important stuff is, and some examples from my career on that for what that's worth. So best bang for the buck if you're looking for learning business. So check that out. Link in the description to the course and to a video I did describing the course, how it works, what you get, etc. It's the most flexible solution around. You can do it entirely on your own schedule and go only into the topics in which you're interested and only to the depth that you're interested in going. So check that out. And get in the chat. Waiting for some questions. I find this stuff really cool to talk about. One of the elements that I think is cool about it is that this is an area where we're still like very inefficient. When you look at the amount of people that leave their employers, and they switch jobs because for whatever reason their experience with a particular organization is not working for them. That alone shows you how bad we are at this. The number one reason why people leave is because of a bad boss. That they did all kinds of studies, data-driven studies, and they found this. It's not because of the compensation being bad, which you would think intuitively that's why people leave, because they're not making enough money. But no, the number one reason is in fact a bad boss. That's why most people leave their jobs. So how to manage people, that's like a terribly important area, Imagine if you're a worker, you could go to work, you could do your job and not feel miserable, because of your boss, right? And then you'd probably do a better job for the boss too. So everybody would be better off, and happier. But yeah, in my career, I had, the early part of my career, I had a lot of, quite a few bad bosses, as I'm sure everybody has. So you really see it firsthand, what are some of the problems with it? Let me know what you guys think. There's 16 people here. Get in the chat. Let me know if you're wondering anything or you have any reaction to any of this stuff. While we're waiting, I'm going to do this. I'd like to do something with ChatGPT. I don't know what. Let's see here. Okay, what are the major areas within how to manage people that are part of understanding great people management skills? Maybe I'll make this bigger. Let's see here. Okay, so, we talked about a lot of this stuff already. So communication skills. Oh, this is like on a sort of a base level kind of thing. Emotional intelligence, right? Self-awareness. Motivation and engagement. This is like motivating a team, I guess, right? Delegation. Yeah, we didn't really talk about this. I mean, delegation, there's many different types of delegation. You can delegate decisions, you can delegate work, you can delegate work in different ways. You could basically say like, okay, I want you to take care of the whole thing. I don't even want to hear about it. You handle it. But if I don't hear anything, I'm just going to assume it's taken care of, right? That's one extreme, all the way to I can delegate to you specific tasks within this, but come back when you're done because I'm basically micromanaging it. I want to be in the loop as to what's going on. I want to be a part of every decision, but you do the work, So that's kind of on the other extreme. So you can delegate multiple different ways to different degrees, and how you do it is going to depend on the situation. Someone's in the chat. And I'm starting to get familiar with this person because they were on a previous chat. I remember the name. Setting boundaries with bosses based on their style. Any thoughts? Yeah, like, for example, that's something that you'll get a feel for pretty early, if the boss is kind of micromanaging you or overstepping what you feel is, reasonable amount of involvement or type of involvement. That's something that, you might want to have a discussion with them on, and say like, I'm noticing that, you're sort of doing this or you're saying this or asking about this or requiring this. And, I find that a bit interesting because, in the past, I've only ever been in situations where, I'm responsible for this, but then the boss, sort of the boundary is right here. They don't call me at home, or they don't, require me to work overtime, or, whatever the issue is, but I understand from what's been going on lately that you obviously have a different perspective on these. And I'm wondering if you could help me understand, what's your strategy on this and what you're thinking on it, because I find that I don't know if I'm entirely comfortable with this or that or whatever, something like that, and just talk through it. And if they're reasonable and it's possible to have that kind of discussion with them and have it go somewhere, then that's something that you can definitely do. If you don't know practically how to set that up, it's pretty simple. What you would like to do ideally is have a private one-on-one conversation with them. And if they have an office, like doing it in their office is kind of the obvious place to do it. You want to do this when they're not stressed out, when they're not upset, annoyed by something, right? Now, if you don't know when that is, usually a good rule of thumb is if you work Monday to Friday, like day shift, like a lot of people do, usually immediately after lunch on a Friday is a great time to go have a conversation with your boss. Usually people are a little more laid back on Friday. They're not quite as stressed out. And after lunch, after their lunch break, they're usually, feeling better. They've just had some food. They've just had a break. They're more relaxed, a little bit happier. So that's usually a good time to approach them. And, a way you could do it is if you just want to do an informal thing, you could just drop by their office. You sort of knock on there, say, hey, you got 2 minutes? Would I be able to get a couple minutes of your time? Hopefully they say yes. You go in, you close the door, and you say, listen, I'm just kind of wondering something. And that is when it comes to this, I noticed that you're doing this. This is how I take it. My preference would be this. Is it possible for us to do it this way? Are you comfortable with that? If you're not entirely comfortable with it, can I convince you to try it for a little while? Let me know what you need, and then I will try and give that to you, and then we could do it this way, and that would work for me. Something like that, those kinds of conversations. Right? So hopefully that gives you enough to go on. That's kind of the general idea. And if you're dealing with somebody reasonable, that should be more than necessary. If you're dealing with somebody unreasonable, the thing to do is still to discuss it, or attempt to discuss it with them first. You don't go over their head first, You at least give them the opportunity to respond and address it, just between you two before it goes anywhere else. You kind of have to do that for a variety of reasons. It's just, if you don't give them that chance, then, you're not entirely the good guy from that point on, right? So if you try and bring it up to them and they kind of like just shut it down out of hand, hey, at least you made the effort. Now, if it's an important issue, then you can escalate it. You can go to their boss, you can go to HR, or whatever. But that's kind of the rule of thumb. You at least give them the chance to address it with you one-on-one. And if you can't get them to take it seriously or to accommodate you or whatever, and it is a big deal, that's when you escalate, And the right thing to do would be to say, like, listen, either we deal with this, or I deal with your boss, or I deal with HR, but one way or another, I got to deal with this. So I'm hoping it could just be the two of us, right? I understand that right now might not be super convenient for you, but, I would like to address this with you within the next couple of days max. If I can't do that, and I have to go over other channels. Right. So that kind of approach, I think, is the way to go. That's the deal with a boss. With a coworker, it's a little bit different. Up to and including dealing with bullies, which is like a whole separate thing. And I learned that kind of the hard way when I was just starting out in the railroad, dealing with railroaders, which was always fun. I've never forgotten some of that stuff. But yeah, that's a great question. So hopefully that answers your concern there. Yeah, let me know. Let me know what, if you guys have any questions about this, about how to manage people, or any of the stuff that I covered in the sort of half an hour of solid monologue that I did when this live stream started. Will Coronel is here. Says, hello, Bill. What kind of leadership style introverts usually have? Well, they could have any or all. Like, you see, the thing is, the leadership style, technically what that's referring to usually, with the way people mean it, is the decision-making process, right? Because, like, leadership involves several things, or multiple things. Leadership itself is a synonym for essentially influencing. You're trying to get other people to behave the way you would have them behave, right? So if you're the boss, you want your team to behave a certain way. Like, for example, you want them to show up on time. You want them to work on projects that you've given them or tasks you've given them. You want them to care about the end result. You want them to do it in a timely manner. You want them to come to you with issues when they encounter an issue. You want them to follow your instructions unless there's a problem, in which case you want them to come back to you. So like these are all behaviors that you're looking for, right? So it's about how to get people to follow those behaviors, right? So if you're an introvert, all that means that, you know, at least the definition of introvert that I go off, which is that you can do social interaction, but it's not something you particularly enjoy. It's an energy draining experience for you. As opposed to extroverts, they can do social interaction, but they thrive on it. It's an energy charging experience. They do it for fun. Introverts do it begrudgingly because they have to, but it's not their idea of fun. When they go home and they want to unwind, they don't surround themselves with 50 people. They read a book or play a video game or watch a movie or something like that, right? So if you're an introvert, it really doesn't affect your decision-making style. You can be a person that can be an autocratic leader. You make a decision and then issue instructions. Or you can involve people to varying degrees. You consult with them. You call a meeting and get them all to participate. You can delegate, decisions to other people, right? The only difference is that you might gravitate towards minimizing the social interaction, I suppose. Excuse me. So you may wish to artificially sort of fight that tendency, because, just like extroverts will naturally gravitate to a decision-making and leadership style that involves many people, because they like interacting with people. That's what they do for fun. Introverts might gravitate the other way. So knowing this about yourself, you may want to just compensate for that by pushing back against it. Your natural tendency might be to just don't involve anyone, make a decision yourself, and then issue instructions. That might not be the right way of handling those types of decisions. So knowing this, you try and involve people more than you would naturally, because it may be appropriate to do so, right? That's kind of the tendency. Now, the thing is, I'm not a psychologist. I don't understand all the finer points of introverts and every single thing they do, but it could be a situation where in every part of this, in the not just the decision making, but in the communication side of things, as an introvert, you're going to gravitate away from interacting with people, right? So, for example, the people that are managers who tend to try and do everything over email, I'd guess that those would probably be more introvert types, Doing everything over email, like we talked about earlier, is not a great way of doing things. There's so many problems with that. You know, knowing that that's maybe your natural tendency, you can sort of compensate for it, not just in the decision making, but also in communication and all this kind of stuff. So every aspect of doing your job. That's the only real. That's the only real thing I would say about like introverts being, being the boss and how it affects how they manage people. As a general rule. But introverts can be every bit as good effective managers as extroverts, right? It depends on what exactly your role is. Obviously, there's some roles where it's a tremendous advantage to be an extrovert if you're going to be like interacting with a lot of people, like sales, for example. Customer service. These roles are entirely based on talking with other people and communicating with other people all the time. So obviously, if you enjoy doing it all the time, that helps, right? Introverts, you got to be, by yourself a lot of times. You prefer to be by yourself. So obviously, technical roles like engineering and stuff, or IT, introverts would gravitate more towards that. But in order to manage people, you have to interact with people, and shying away from it is usually not going to make you very good at it, But that's a great question, by the way. I hadn't really, honestly, kind of surprising, I hadn't really thought about that as it relates to leadership as a topic, you know what I mean? Or a leadership style. It's because these are different elements of your personality. Like, for example, how you make decisions is one aspect of your personality type, right? I'm not a psychologist, but, it's obviously a part of how you think and what makes you, right? So how you make decisions is part of that. Now, how you relate to social interaction is another part of what makes you. So the introvert-extrovert sort of continuum, right? That's another aspect of it. These don't directly, come up against each other, apples to apples, right? You know what I mean? Like, you can be an introvert and you can make decisions based on hard, cold facts, or you could be an introvert and make decisions based on emotion, how things feel. I've worked with both. I've also worked with extroverts that do both of those, right? Very touchy-feely, mood-driven extroverts, and also extroverts, but, they make decisions in a very fact basis, I remember being in engineering school years ago with like a ton of very bright people, and, it surprised me that a lot of them were extroverted, jock types, athletic jock types, but they were also very bright and they were doing engineering. And that was these kinds of people. They had technical minds, but yet they were very extrovert, So I hadn't really seen that before, but that's a type of person. So, these things are kind of independent. Get in the chat. Let me know if you guys have any questions. I do these as long as people, are interacting and have questions and want to talk about it. Obviously, business and management is not the sort of central focus of my channel, but it's actually more my core competency. And so I'd like to always include a little bit of this on my YouTube channel. It's a topic I'm still fascinated by today. I've had a lot of experience in this area, but I realize that what I've done is a tiny subset of what you could do with this stuff. And so that, combined with the fact that we have so far to go, there's so much improvement that can be made in this area. Some things are like, some areas of study are like mature. We're like 98% of as far as you theoretically could go. With this stuff, we're like 30% of how far you could go. You know what I mean? There's so many imperfections with this stuff. It's still done very poorly out in the real world on average. So we have so far to go. And it's also fascinating considering that there's so much attention put into this topic. Everybody's talking about it. People are throwing money at it. But yet we're so bad at it, You're welcome, Will Cornell. Absolutely welcome. It was a great question. Okay, last call. Anybody have any questions, comments, or things they're wondering? Let me know in the chat. Get in the chat, and we can talk about it. This is a fascinating topic. This is one of the things that you study in an MBA, by the way. And yes, I have a course on that. Check out that course if you want to be a better people manager. You want to learn things like organizational behavior and stuff like that, or just general management skills. Learn various ways of motivating a team in management and how it's traditionally been looked at, how you monitor performance, how you keep people focusing on the right things. Check that out. There's a general management course within that, and then there's also an organizational behavior course within that, both of which are directly relevant to what we're talking about here. The other thing is that even areas like finance, when you learn how to think like that, that can also inform how you manage a team. Understanding like how you look at things like risk, and you look at things like, what has an effect and what doesn't have an effect on the bottom line. That also is part of the discussion too. So there you go. Barbarossa says, hello. How to land a management job without prior experience in management. Okay, well, that's kind of more how to get a job. I guess we could talk about this as sort of the last thing we cover. Huge topic. Like, I can't even scratch the surface on this one in any amount of time. But to summarize, some people, they go to school to learn management skills, in which case that can get you a management job. More often than not, it usually is a combination of management and people skills on one hand and technical skills on the other. Okay. So if you have experience in an industry, you've been a worker in an industry, so you have a skill, you have abilities, right? That combined with general management skills can be a pretty fierce combination. Now, on the low level, the people that they usually pick to manage people at a low level are usually like a jumped up worker. So you might have a group of workers, and they'll maybe pick the senior one, which usually isn't a great idea, but or the one that has extroverted traits. They tend to be a good speaker. They tend to socialize a lot. They'll say, oh, you seem to have people skills, so we'll put you in charge. I'm not a fan of that. It's like, it's not the worst thing in the world, but that's how we get a lot of bad managers. People that don't have any actual management skills, they have technical skills and they can talk, they put them in charge. And that's when you get a lot of problems, really, because they don't know how to motivate people. They don't know how to relate to people that aren't like them. They don't understand other ways of doing it. They don't understand the different, possibilities or tools you have at your disposal to relate to people, to communicate, to, motivate people. They don't understand what you could do. They only know one thing that they've seen. I tell you to do it, and if you don't do it to my satisfaction, I start yelling at you. Not a great way of doing things, but that's what we see. You know what I mean? Now, in terms of like how to get a job, I suppose you could like apply for a job as a manager, and then sometimes you get it, with no management experience. In order for that to happen, I would suspect that you would have had to shown a lot of rapport with your interviewers at the job interviews, right? That would be like a absolute requirement. And then when they ask you management related questions, you know enough to be able to answer those questions correctly. So they would ask you, like in an interview, they'd say, how do you motivate people? Or, if you have a problem employee that's maybe being passive aggressive, how would you handle it? And, you might not really know a lot about that stuff, but you've seen how that was handled in your workplace as a worker. So you could say, well, I do it like this, and that's like the way that people did it to you, right? And they go, okay, well, that's fine. That's acceptable, right? If it's a very competitive type management job, there's a lot of people competing for it. They're hard to get. You do have a bit of a catch-22 where it's like they won't give you a management position or even a supervisory experience without management training or management experience, but you can't get the experience because no one will give you the job, right? So it's a catch-22. You can break that with networking. That's a theme of job search in general. You can break that catch-22. It's the same problem, by the way, when people don't have any job experience. No one will hire you because you haven't had a job before, and you can't get a job because no one will hire you. So, it's a catch-22. You break that by networking, by going and meeting the people, because in that case, you're not getting the job because of your resume and what you've done prior. You're getting the job because you're the only one that showed up. You're the one that showed up, that showed passion, displayed good communication skills, displayed professionalism. That's what got you in there, right? So management roles, it works the same way, But the thing is, here on this stream, we're talking about managing people, right? Management in general is larger than that. Like, for example, if you know nothing about accounting, how could you manage like a department? You have to tack on the financial management skills. If you've never made financial decisions before, you know nothing about finance. How would you do a management role where you had to regularly make decisions about appropriating money and paying for things that are expensive? Should we go with option A or option B? And you know nothing about finance or financial decision making. That's going to be a major problem. Like there's a lot of technical skills that you have to tack on. So more than just people management, right? So management in general is like a larger topic. If you're going from a worker to a supervisor role, usually you have to tack on the people skills component, like communication skills, that kind of thing, how to motivate people, right? But if you're going up to a management role, then that's where you tack on things like how to manage money, how to manage projects, how to do change management, all that other stuff that's kind of in there, right? Having above average communication skills definitely is going to be a part. And then the thing that nobody really talks about when they talk about management roles is that the nature of the job changes, because for most management roles, there are exceptions, but most management roles, the other aspect that's going on here is that now you're representing your organization. Officially or unofficially, you're representing them. You can't act the same way you did as a worker a lot of times. When you're a worker, you can gripe to other workers and say, this company, they don't know what they're doing. They're a bunch of idiots. If you're a manager and you're hanging out with the workers and you're saying, oh yeah, tell me about it. This company, they're just a bunch of idiots. It's like that might not be so great, right? For a variety of reasons. So your behavior has to change a little too in the workplace. They have to believe that you're going to be behaving appropriately, So there's all these things. So I don't know if that really helps. Maybe that puts the problem in perspective a little more. I'm not sure, but I mean, huge topic. What I would recommend is, if this is something you're trying to do, zero in on like each of those, the financial skills, the communication skills, the people management skills, all that stuff, even things like marketing skills and stuff like that. You have to have a basic appreciation for all these things. So it's like you know. Now, I honestly wasn't trying to do this, okay? But if you don't know where to look for that stuff and you want to learn more with me, you could check out that course. It actually has all that stuff in it. So, I mean, it might be a little overkill, but it has that stuff in it. So, you know, but one way or another, look into these things, because that's the type of person they're going to want to promote into a management role. Someone that has an appreciation for all these different things, knows the basics, you know, and none of these areas are going to be an issue for them, right? So that's how you put yourself forward for those and get it and are able to then deliver on it. Hopefully that helps. Great question. Let me know if you guys have any other questions. There's 17 people here. I will stay if other people have questions. If not, I will wrap this up. So let me know. I'll hang out another minute or so and see if anything else comes up. Get in the chat. On a personal note, I'm still under the weather. I've been under the weather for about a week. Some kind of cold, mild flu type thing going around. So I'm still kind of recovering from that. So hopefully another couple of days I'll be back to my old self, maybe after this weekend. And yeah, hopefully everybody else is doing okay. There are 19 people here. Thank you for being here. Hopefully you got something out of this today. If you're just joining us, I've just opened it up to questions. I've done my sort of monologue bit, and now it's about answering questions. If you guys have questions about managing people and that kind of stuff, if you're wanting to learn those skills, or you have some horror stories, or you have some opinions on it, or questions, we can get into that stuff. I do this live stream once a week, so every Friday at the same time, we talk about business. Also, if you have any topic suggestions, you'd like me to cover certain things, let me know what those are, and I will take it under advisement. I've done a few of these actually that were based on topics that came from viewers that suggested a topic. So if you're wondering anything, let me know. Okay, one final reminder. If you want to learn business, if you want to climb the ladder, you want to move upwards into management and all this kind of stuff, if that's you, learning business is pretty important if you want to be in business. So I have a course. It's called the $100 MBA. It's right there. Check out that course. There's a link to it in the description box under this live stream. And I've also made a video that's like a frequently asked questions video about that course. So it explains how it works and what you get and all that kind of stuff. Best bang for the buck around if you're wanting to learn business. Teaches you everything that you would learn in a 2-year university program in one course. And the course is really a program, but the thing is, it's tremendously flexible. I created it for people who want to learn business but don't want to go back to school for 2 years. They don't want to pay 5 figures to learn all this material, nor should they. Like 98% of what they teach you in an MBA, that information, that material is in the public domain. You know what I mean? It's been around for a long time. And so I think it's borderline criminal for a lot of universities and stuff to charge what they charge for MBA programs. It's worth. I have an MBA. I took it in university, but you shouldn't have to go to those lengths to learn this stuff. You could learn this stuff by reading the books, you know, and so that's what you get in my course. So check that out if you're interested in that kind of thing. It'll help you be more effective in your job as a worker. It'll also give you the tools, what you need to move upwards, and then just a matter of going through the motions to demonstrate to people that you do in fact have that knowledge and skill. Okay, I think we're good for today. I'm going to wind this down. Thanks to the people who participated and who showed up for this. You guys are awesome. I will be back next Friday with another episode of Leadership Skills for Managers. I will be back also in an hour with another live stream where we talk about job search. It's just me answering your questions on job search. That's happening in just under 1 hour from now. So come back then if you got questions on that, and we'll get into it. Until then, take care of yourselves and have a good weekend, and I will see you soon. Take care.